morning, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Anasa. So happy to see you this morning. So let's start with meditation. And the first thing we want to share with you is that meditation is really about withdrawing your attention from the outside world and bringing it into your inside world. And for a temporary time, to the exclusion of the outside world. We almost never do that, except when we consciously sit down to meditate. The outer world always manages to get our attention. So if we set our intention to really take our first of all, our attention, using our intention to really feel deeply inside ourselves, to cultivate our inner sensory system. So the first thing we do is withdraw our attention. And the one sense we're requesting you to keep available, especially if you don't know this meditation well, is your auditory sense. But you can close your eyes, which for most of us is our primary sense. And we're going to do the Om meditation, which begins with our attention in our tailbone as we say the ah sound, as we sing it in the beginning. And then we will sing the oo sound as we move our attention up to the heart. And then it's sort of a vibration of the sound, which is the M sound, kind of like wax paper against a comb. If you were a child at the time I was, that was something we did. But it's a vibratory sound that kind of opens up our third eye and the top of our head. So it's is the direction of the Om sound, and it actually has 3 parts. So we'll sing it once for everybody before we start, and then we'll do that 9 times, and then we'll do it 9 times in a whisper. And that whisper, you want to cultivate your intention so that there's real power behind that whisper as you feel into this new sensory system that you're trying to cultivate awareness and participation in. So the second set of 9, we will whisper all the time, focusing on these 3 energy centers and feeling the energy itself rising up as we make the sounds. Then the third set of 9 we'll do just silently, but keeping our breath in alignment with the 3 sounds as we speak them inside ourselves, the same way we've been doing it with external sound. And we watch the energy rise as we say it inside ourselves. And then we do that whole 9 another 4 times as we can still remember the sound and apply the sound, but we're really watching the energy rise within ourselves. So that was sort of a long explanation for a simple practice, which will be saying the Om, first singing it. And of course, we'll have the pitch go up, and we want you to do it with whatever pitch is comfortable for you. You don't have to match ours. Not important. So we'll do it once, and then we'll do everything 9 times. So take a deep breath in. Aum. 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 Holding your attention in your central channel. Gently open your eyes a crack, but don't let your attention escape. As you let the light in just a little bit, hold your attention in your meditation. Gently open your eyes a little more as you hold your attention in alignment inside yourself. Allow your eyes to open all the way while you're still holding your attention inside. Feel into this experience and how different it is from how you usually view the world, from what your inner perspective is like just when you're sitting quietly. We welcome your questions. And see if you can keep bringing yourself back to this inner perspective as you allow your attention to come in and out of your body. So many of us spend a lot of our attention 2 feet in front of us in a mechanical instrument. It feels so different to be centered in our bodies. And it's almost like our attention no longer belongs to us when we put it outside. So it's an interesting experience to contemplate, and how we can use our intention to begin to withdraw into our own center as we participate outside of ourselves. So that we have a choice about what part of ourselves is engaging. Morning, everybody. How are we doing? Anything, Brenda? Well, it's not really fair to take your attention that deep inside and then ask you to ask questions. Andrew?
Not a formulated question exactly, but it's a really open-ended question. But for beings like you, guardians, what does it take to ask for help?
So let's understand the question. You're asking how to ask for help from
Well,
other dimensions.
It's not just how, but from what space to ask for help, especially for restraints.
Well, this is actually so he's asking what space how do we ask for help from other dimensions? And this is actually a very, very important question. The, the, the reason it's important is because the fundamental issue with humanity is a lack of trust in that which will really serve us. So it's interesting. We were kind of having this discussion with Rebecca in the shower this morning because she was taking a shower, and normally, even when she washes her hair, she doesn't like completely close her eyes and go underwater and lose touch with the environment, because there's an element of PTSD, and she was aware of that this morning and aware of consciously releasing that. And so there was this conversation about trust, just in daily activity. Trust when we let go enough to go to sleep. Trust, it's an issue in every part of our lives, because all of us have felt at some point in our lives some sense of violation from the outer world. And so we say, I'm not going to be vulnerable to that anymore. And we no longer trust life itself. And so when we ask for help, we don't exactly expect to receive it, because we're not engaging with something familiar that we trust to be loving. And so where we ask and what we're exactly asking for when we ask for help is important, because really the only thing that will make us happy in the long run is to know and trust completely that source from which we arise. That's the only thing that true satisfaction, it's the only thing that gives us true satisfaction. And so when we ask from that sense of true satisfaction, we're already connected to that which we wish to receive. And so we're having a dialogue. And that's why it's really important to cultivate that connection with our source, so that we really have that trust. And that trust is of no benefit to our source. It's only a benefit to us. Source energy does not need to be worshiped. It's not a cause and effect or a rewards and punishment relationship. And so it's really interesting that so few people actually cultivate and receive the gift of that awareness. But it's not so hard to understand, because all of us have felt violated from the outside, and we blame it on our source. And we only have to think for 2 seconds to realize that that's not the source of our discomfort. It's something far more differentiated than that. Did that answer your question, Andrew?
So, which is how to, in what way to ask for help, or from what space to ask for help. If there's this, I mean, it sounds like, misunderstanding, which prevents that.
Well, there's a part of us that doesn't believe that help is available. And it's the part of us that that song "Give Peace a Chance" is just rolling through for some reason. And it's like we don't believe that peace is really a viable solution or a possible solution in ourselves. We don't believe in it. And so if we don't believe that love is available to us, that love created us and that we're born from that, and that in the deepest of all possible ways, everything is okay and we can't do it wrong. If we don't really believe that, how can we experience it? And then there's if we don't really experience it, how can we believe it? So it's this circular argument. And the truth of it is, our meditation is really about cultivating this inner trust to the point where we just allow it to guide us. And so this is the answer to the question. In order to receive guidance, we have to allow it entry. And the difficulty of that is, in a way, the term surrender is right. We have to let go of all our resistance for that allowing to be able to demonstrate itself. And so, in a sense, we do have a personal war going on with our resistance to allowing what feels like a childlike innocence to be at our fundamental core. And yet this is where that help that we seek actually comes from. Can you guys hear okay? Am I too soft? Wally, everybody else is saying they can hear okay. So it might be your volume or something. Just letting you know what we're seeing. So we got distracted. Did that answer? Yes. Could you address ancestors, their influence and effect on you if you open to them? Well, ancestors, their influence and effect if you open to them. Here's the thing about ancestors. We carry them inside us in our DNA. In every cell of our being, we carry our ancestors. And so they have a powerful impact whether we are aware of it or not, because we're made from them. And so there's no question about opening or closing. They are not other. We are part of an ancestral lineage. That can't be denied. That's part of being a human being born from other human beings, and the combination of DNA and the science that we know about how human beings are formed from other human beings. And so there's no question about opening or closing. That is part of what we are. And we can it can give us a context to actually have a broader view and take responsibility for our behavior in a different way by knowing that it's not our fault what we feel a lot of the time. It's not our, like, we were born into this lineage without, when we arrive here, there's a great forgetting. We don't know anything about anything. And so we're informed by our peers and elders about who we are and how to behave. And it's fairly late in the game that we discover that what we're made of is a lot of conflicting information that, as we try to make sense of it as adults, a lot of it is completely contradictory. And there are these waves of feeling that come to us that we don't know where they come from, that we can't identify exactly in our past experience, but that we have very strong reactions to. And we don't know where those reactions come from as we start to be contemplative about our inner and outer experience. And so this introduces us to the fact that we have large parts of ourselves that are unexplained in our own experience that we access on a daily basis. And so attributing that to, those reactivities that we have that don't make any sense, it's helpful to attribute that to people in our lineage that might have had strong experiences that we don't know about, that we're reacting to, because it's a way to make peace with those experiences. And that's the important thing. The important thing is that we make peace inside ourselves with whatever we find, that we're not surprised when we discover contradictions in ourselves. This is a lot of the source of the belief in reincarnation, is that we have all of these experiences that don't make any sense to us in how we react to them. And so the idea in reincarnation is that we are experiencing over time everything that every human being experiences. And we are accumulating those experiences. And when we have resolved the whole thing, the idea is that when we have resolved everything within ourselves, then we no longer need to come here anymore. That's sort of in a nutshell what that whole philosophy is about. And in a way, it's really, in many ways, it's very helpful, because it means that these things that we experience that don't make any sense, we're off the hook in terms of trying to understand them. We don't need to understand them. We just need to make peace with them. And it's the peace, it's the understanding that why should we be surprised when a murderous impulse arises in us? Because everything is going to arise in us at some time or another. We're going to experience it all. And so it gives us the capacity to accept what arises, say, wow, that's there. How interesting. Well, I don't have to react in that way, but it's interesting and informative to know that that's there, so that I'm not surprised when it rises up again. I don't need to act it out, because that's not who I am. But I can understand it's there because I'm a human being, and all human beings really have capacity to experience everything. That's part of being human. And so if we allow that everything could exist within us, all parts are welcome to be brought into harmony so that we can live from peace. When we discover the most horrible things about ourselves, that's okay, because we're human, and we have access to the totality of human experience, ultimately. And that's really a very profound understanding. And it kind of makes the whole idea of forgiveness irrelevant, because it's not about forgiveness. Forgiveness makes somebody right and somebody wrong. And most of the time, it's way more complicated than that. And so forgiveness perpetuates disharmony. We will say that because it makes right and wrong part of the playing field. And it's really about peace. It's really about allowing. And it's a much more sophisticated understanding to not demand that it all makes sense in a sort of pure, refined way. Because chaos is also part of the equation. And so when you understand that, then there's a big, wide road to walk on where everything is okay. The absolute worst, the absolute best, the most horrible thing you can imagine, and the most ecstatic thing that you can imagine. All parts are welcome. And that's, you know, we didn't knowingly sign a contract, but, you know, we sort of have one with the universe that we're trying to discover. We're trying to discover how to be at peace with whatever that contract is. And allowing it all to be there in its most horrific and its most ecstatic at the same moment. That's what equanimity is. Not demanding that it be one way or another. Not rejecting. The most important thing is that we don't reject ourselves. That's what we're really trying to say. There is nothing in us that is so horrific that deserves rejection. Nothing. And the beauty of reincarnation is that it allows us endless do-overs, or at least the concept of that. Because what are we doing but trying to conceptualize something that's beyond our understanding, because it's beyond 3D linear thinking and reality. And so the only way that we can escape this linear thinking and reality is to make all parts welcome and stop rejecting any of it. And then we suddenly have the opportunity to expand our awareness into non-judgment. And it's really judgment that holds us captive to third dimensional reality. And it's the allowing ourselves to dream of utopia where everything, where the same world can be here, but there's absolutely no limitation to what's the resources that are available to support us. It's our constant focus on what we don't have enough of that continuously reinforces the idea that we live in a limited environment. And it keeps us trapped in that limitation. And there's a part of us that demands, wants to demand that it all be rational. And we understand that rational is putting everything in boxes. And it does work to organize our physical environment, but it doesn't work in our inner environment. It really limits us because there's no room. There's no room in that organization for the chaos that love creates and the chaos that its opposite creates. But it is in finding that space, that pure awareness at the center of everything, that our union with that which has made us is available. And it's huge. It's vast. It's incomprehensible. Which is why we can only experience it. We can't exactly think our way through it or to it. But our breath knows where it is. And if you follow the breath to where it stops, and just allow that to expand, and let the words disappear. That's where it is. Yes.
I'd like to keep centered internally consistently, but I find that every time I encounter another person, I jump into my mind and some level of defensiveness. How can I practice keeping inside without other people talking to me?
Well, this is a fact of life that all external experience is a distraction from the internal. You know, Rebecca had a teacher who used to describe it as being two places at once and nowhere at all. The thing about it is that once tasted, never forgotten. And it's enough to keep us motivated for the rest of our lives to be dedicated to the cultivation of alignment with that which is our source. And if we think of it as alignment, it makes things a lot simpler. And the other thing that makes it simpler is that it becomes alignment with a feeling. And meditation becomes the cultivation of that feeling. And that's part of what we're trying to make you aware of with this soul meditation, is that we are essentially energetic light beings having a physical experience. And that in the cultivation of our light, our awareness of our light and our alignment with that light, we discover ourselves to be much vaster beings than this, what some people call a meat sack. Because this is just, and we will say just, this is our physical presence. And when we realize that we're more than our physical presence and that our physical presence is actually a manifestation of something much greater that we have access to in the here and now, just by putting our attention there and by cultivating that attention, then our whole perspective is different. And it's not about accepting or rejecting what's outside. It's about accepting all of it, every part of it, inside, outside, and realizing that we're never separate from any of it, that these are all separations we've created in our mind and our experience because our sensory capacity is limited. And so we assume that that is the limitation of our experience. And it's a big surprise to discover that we have extrasensory perception, which is a whole light range inside of ourselves, a whole feeling range inside of ourselves, a whole set of experiences with no vocabulary available to share with each other. Because these experiences are non-linear. And linear mind cannot hold them. And yet every single one of us would not be on this call if we didn't have that experience and want to recreate it over and over. And the truth is, it always exists inside us. And it's we who turn away from it. And so this is why we gave what seemed like such a convoluted answer about prayer. Because asking for the help we need and allowing the help we need are exactly the same thing. And in our demanding that the help look a certain way and be a certain way, we are actually resisting the reality. And part of that resisting has to do with the human understanding, whether we live in denial of it or in appreciation of it. Our lives are finite. And so we are trying to relate to the infinite possibilities within us from a finite perspective, which is why language ceases to hold the experience, because our language is based in the finite. Interestingly, our perception is not limited by the finite. That's why we're having this conversation. Human beings have complete range in our creativity, in the field of our creativity. All the arts are trying to express what it is that our language can't. End of sentence. This is why we love art. It gives us access to that something. But you see our difficulty, we're constantly talking around what we're trying to share. So we hope we answered that question. We completely lost any sense of what it was by now. Yes. Rebecca's linear mind is not controlling this conversation, that's for sure.
I think they're saying how when they encounter another person, their mind jumps into some level of defensiveness immediately rather than staying centered. And how do they practice not being defensive and staying inside in their groundedness?
Well, that's why it's called practice. It's practice. And that's where, we start to label ourselves as failure and success. And when we label ourselves as failure, then we've immediately shut down. Because failure is one of those labels that we shut down when we receive. So it's more than just practice. I mean, it's more than just practicing not being defensive. It's allowing yourself to fail without judgment. And, interestingly, the more we practice perfection in any arena of our life, the more we come to make peace with failure. Because we understand pretty quickly when we try to be perfect at anything, that we can be perfect on whatever we're concentrating on in that moment, but there are always like multiple arenas of perfection happening in the same moment. So when you're hanging on to one, another one slips out of your grasp, and it's like that. And so when you understand that that's just the essence of being a human, you can sort of take a deep breath and the whole idea of failure and success, I'm thinking about being a musical performance. You finally get to the point where you understand that the mistakes are part of the performance. And it's like how you weave it in and accommodate it and make it imperceptible is really what performing is about, and really what sharing the joy of creativity is about, and what makes the difference between. It's no longer about success and failure. It becomes about sharing an experience that transcends all of it. And that anybody involved in a creative endeavor will tell you that that's the most fulfilling experience ever. Because it's never going to be perfect. From a certain level, it can be, but all of us have experienced the limitations of that kind of perfection, because that's not perfection, but a rigid kind of control. And that doesn't work either. And so there is this play that happens when creativity is free and totally connected to that. It's what everybody calls the zone. So there is this allowing that happens that's beyond the judgment of success and failure. It's allowing. And you understand that every experience we participate in is living and dynamic and changing as it happens. And when we begin to cultivate this experience of allowing throughout every experience of our life, then that magical zone is not just a moment in time, but it can become an entire lifestyle of cultivating awareness of complete acceptance, no matter what, of everything. And that is what we're trying to point to. It's called flow. When you're really in it, it's flow. And people around you gravitate to that. And as you see, we can do it with our hands. We can't really talk about it. But it just happens. And it does have a quality of an infinity symbol to it. It's like but it's one that has a dynamic that's constantly shifting and changing, and it just adapts to whatever wind, whatever pressure, whatever anything is coming through. And this is what we want to become, is so centered in that essential awareness that we don't even know we're doing it, we just are it. And life becomes an art form. Everybody on this call, I can see you feeling it in this moment. And it's magic. Miracle. And it is life itself. And the second we try to grab it, it disappears. And that's part of its beauty. It is always there. It is ever present. It's completely available. It's us who turns away from it. Because when you're in it, the idea of mastery of it is ridiculous. You're just in it. it completely defeats any idea of mastery because it's flow itself, it's life itself. And so seek to ride the wave of infinity. And you see how the prayer and the answer become the same, because it's just the wave. And the wave becomes a particle, and the particle becomes a wave. I mean, you're really in the essence of life itself. And you can feel the breath in it, in you, and the connection to that. And it's about the poetry of beingness. We bow to you. The experience is right here. You're in it. Please, any questions?
This is so closely related to your current answer, but I don't want to ignore their question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you please talk more about judgment and being judgmental, the source and process for letting it go? Thank you.
Well, see, we're all trained. All of our education is about differentiation, which is judgment. Judgment is the expectation that things will be a certain way, and if they aren't, they're bad. That's a definition of judgment. And so when you think of judgment as a closing off rather than an opening, then if you concentrate on allowing, judgment's also about control. When you understand that none of us can control anything, really. It's what we really want to engineer against is our death. And ultimately, that's what we're all trying to engineer against. And not only is that futile, it grounds us, that attempt to engineer anything. Kind of grounding and not a good word, like coming to ground when you're floating. It's what it does is it grinds that experience of flow to a halt. So if you concentrate on the flow rather than the judgment, that will help enormously. It's all about where we put our attention. If we put our attention on allowing, then there's a kind of openness. You know, the willingness to experience the awe of a child when they haven't tasted ice cream for a while and they suddenly take that first bite and the glow on the face. It's just like, oh my God, to have that experience. To allow that childish awe to arise at any given moment, to cultivate that in yourself, the appreciation of a flavor or the feeling of the sun on your skin when you haven't felt that for a while, and how it just, oh, it just kind of bursts forward, the warmth from the sun. It's like, oh my God. Any sensation can be like that when you put your attention on it and allow it to inform you. When you treat your own experience as anything but mundane, and the very life itself in the experience becomes pure sensation. And it doesn't matter which sense is primary. We're all different in that way of how that organizes itself within us, but we just allow it to inform us in such a sensuous way that it kind of takes over for a minute. That delight at experiencing, that's part of the flow. And when we cultivate our life to be that kind of experience, you know, if you have that experience 4 times in your day, it's a totally different day than if you haven't allowed that experience in years. So we would say that cultivate those experiences and forget about the judgment. Allow yourself to forget about judgment. And cultivate a true wondrous appreciation of what it is to be alive in a moment, to breathe, to really breathe. And there's somebody in the neighborhood mowing the grass, and so there's just this faint smell of that fresh grass. And the feeling of the impending summer, not just the spring, but the summer in the air. And the other thing is the Om sound in this room is really just so potent. And your senses begin to sing with the feedback because you're cultivating it. And life becomes something totally different. And it's not that anything has changed except your attention. And you're allowing it to be what it is in every moment. And encouraging yourself to extract the joy that's present always. And then the understanding comes that what we've really allowed to change is our attention and our intention. Our intention to experience whatever's the most delicious sensation in our environment, in the moment. We have that capacity as human beings to make that choice. Doesn't that make a lot more sense than anything we'd compare it to? And we'll still do our laundry and cook our next meal and all the other things that need to be done. Nothing is lost in that change of attention. And our experience has a whole different quality to it. And the thing is, it's not more right or more wrong. It's just different. And in cultivating and allowing that difference, we can begin to expand our horizon of what it is to be a human. And our own experience of life becomes art. Starts with allowing the breath. Allowing the light, allowing the smells. Just being. And not demanding that it be something. Not demanding that it be anything in particular. For just a moment. And just experiencing what is. Knowing that our life could finish in the next instant. But appreciating this moment for everything that it has to offer. And it's interesting because the moment you allow the paralysis of the fear of death to actually be present for you, you'll discover that it will disappear. The moment you allow it, you can't hold it anymore. You can only hold it when you're feeling it like this and trying to keep it away. Then that rigidity takes over and you're just like terrified of everything. The second you welcome it, okay, come. Fear, rigidity, you can't find it. And it's a very interesting paradox when we're studying. sure talked a lot today. Hmm. Do you have any questions about the meditation we've been doing? Is it helpful? Any feedback? Okay. Anything? Yeah. Guess it's time to meditate again. Hmm. So we're going to invite you again into the central channel inside your own body. Understand that what we are doing is cultivating an inner awareness, a very personal, intimate inner awareness that allows us to change our experience, to be available to a different experience. So feel deeply into that central channel and the three parts of the Om sound, U, and M, and the feeling of the rising up and expanding into the all of the all that is, that becomes available. Do it in your own way, at your own pace. We'll be doing same, and we'll just do that for the next few minutes. Hmm. Thank you so much. Mm. Till next week.